this is my review of Slime Diaries. Okay, so autumn is now upon the city of Nation of Tempest, and that means it's time to go harvest some crops. So it starts off with Rimuru and Milim admiring the leaves changing. When the leaves start to change, Rimuru makes a kind of a remark about how I forget the actual phrase, but the phrase is autumn brings clear skies and stout horses, which I don't fully understand, and Milim kind of agrees with it because she just kind of points out that she doesn't. Well, truth be told, nobody really knows what a horse is, so Rimuru has to explain that when harvests were good, horses would actually get plump and put on some weight, with Milim merely remarking that horses sound like a bunch of gluttons. But then she proceeds to down an entire plate full of snacks by herself, and Rimuru even remarks that her belly seems to be extending a little bit, and decides to change it to autumn brings clear skies and stout demon lords. So yeah, it's funny, but it's just a little bit. It's also a little bit mean because he also called her fat without her actually noticing, because he kind of said it all in his head. But in any case, he then proceeds to gather the citizens of Tempest to actually go and harvest vegetables and all the fruits and vegetables that they planted several episodes ago, remarking that they actually need to as he points out, people can only learn kindness once their base necessities are met, and that's the kind of nation he wants to run. So for that reason, he decided to teach them all how to grow crops in hopes that they will continue to be productive. And then also begins to remark that they actually have as far as their special guest. Then Trainee then interrupts and remarks that she's going to be helping out this time around because she didn't get to when they first planted them, and that she hopes that there will be a bountiful harvest. And then Rimuru begins to speak up again to their next point, and Milim just states that they're going to continue to feed her tasty food, which everybody cheers about. But this just kind of goes back and forth between those two, kind of starting up to several various cheers. And Rimuru merely remarks that they're kind of intense. At which point Rimuru meets with Ririna, and she begins to point out all the plans for what they need to do to actually get all the harvest done efficiently, and remarks that if they are all successful in their goals, they'll actually have everything harvested by sundown. And Rimuru merely remarks about how capable she is, about how not only is she a very capable, not a human being, but a very capable person, but in addition to that, she's a very cute person in that there's not really many flaws with her. But then we find out that she does have one very major flaw, and that is that she doesn't like it when people kind of slack off. Case in point, and she's very intense about it. Case in point, she sees Gobta and his friends lounging about, and immediately gets very confrontational with them, pointing out that they should be ashamed for slacking off in front of Rimuru, that they need to be working, and that they can't just be slacking off and spending all day lazing about in the sun, and more importantly, that she will threaten to put them in the fertilizer if they don't move their cakes. So yeah, she immediately scares Gobta and his friends into working, and then proceeds to go immediately back to her sweet persona, with Rigor remarking that she's apparently always been like this, and that she never really changed. And Rimuru remarks that she's kind of intense a little bit, and that she's very she's very admirable in her ability to get people to work. And then cuts to Shion and Milim actually working on harvesting sweet potatoes, but the way they frame the scene is it sets them up as kind of shonen rivals, where they're just kind of working to be super intense, and they're going to go all out and to fight the other person, but what they're actually doing is harvesting sweet potatoes, and they don't really need to be that over the top about it. But it even starts with them poking jabs at one another, with Miller remarking that she is one of the 10 great, her abilities are superior to the other 10 great demon lords, and then it adds at harvesting sweet potatoes, and then And then Shion remarks that she's considered the ogre goddess in their village, and that her skills are also second to none, and then also it adds at harvesting sweet potatoes. And then they proceed to harvest sweet potatoes at an intensity that can only be described as a typical Dragon Ball battle. So, yeah, they kind of go all out of harvesting sweet potatoes, and Rimuru is quick to point out it doesn't really make sense for them to do that, but as long as they get the work done, he doesn't really care. He then proceeds to show the dragon newts to their harvest of rice, and immediately Gabiru is completely moved by the beauty of his harvesting. But Rimuru repeatedly tells him not to sing or dance because there's really no time for that. But Rimuru then points out that they finally need to harvest it. At which point they break into song about how they don't want to harvest it because of how beautiful it is, and Rimuru just remarks that they're a bit of a pain in the ass regardless of the context. So, yeah. So yeah, they're moved to the beauty of their rice, and you just kind of want to admire it. But Rimuru is quick to point out that if they don't, it is that they're not going to have any rice for actual meals and stuff. So, they like it or not, they have to harvest it. But in any case, it then cuts to Trainee and a couple other goblins working, and a couple of goblins actually working on and harvesting potatoes. And she's quick, and while Rigard is completely against the idea of Trainee actually harvesting potatoes for herself and for the other people, for the village, Trainee merely remarks it's alright because dryads come from potatoes. And Haruda overhears this conversation and makes the assumption that Trainee is a cannibal. So she's a little bit perturbed by Trainee's enthusiasm at harvesting potatoes, just a little bit because of that statement. Meanwhile, but eventually, Shion and Milim have started harvesting potatoes, and they're still harvesting potatoes in the scene. But now, instead of competing over who can harvest the most, they're now competing over who can harvest the biggest sweet potato. Shion currently has the record because she found kind of the biggest one, and Milim is kind of struggling because she can't, despite her best efforts, she can't actually find a very big sweet potato, and that they're all kind of duds. But eventually she does find one and plucks it up, and looks suspiciously like Rimuru. That's all I'm gonna say. It looks like Rimuru, but as a radish. It kind of looks like, and I will admit, it does kind of look more like a radish than a sweet potato, and that's just me. But it is indeed a sweet potato. But in any case, after all the sweet potatoes have been harvested, Rimuru then proceeds to show everybody how to actually create roasted sweet potatoes. And while Milim is completely confused as to what exactly they're doing, he remarks that they're going to be roasting the sweet potatoes to make them into a delicious treat, and then asks her to provide the sweet potato that she would like cooked. And so she provides the Rimuru-looking sweet potato. He cooks it, and then she immediately has a panic attack because she doesn't want her beloved sweet potato to be cooked. So, at which point Rimuru, after being thrown around a little bit, has to kind of calm her down, pointing out that they're just going to be cooking the sweet potatoes and that this is a natural process, and that eventually when it's done, it'll become nice and sweet. And she is quick to and while Milim isn't completely happy about that, she decides that she's going to wait, and while she waits, she eventually starts singing a song about cooked sweet potatoes, and everybody else kind of joins in. But while the sweet potatoes are cooking, Rimuru actually meets with another group has been harvesting other wild veggies. And he notices that among them there's actually a rare group of mushrooms, and he's over the moon for that because, as he points out, they're very rare and very hard to come by, or at least they would be if he were still on Earth. But as it turns out, in the world where he has reincarnated, they're actually a very common mushroom that grow all over the place, and that doesn't really matter, and they're not really all that rare. So Rimuru is just kind of depressed that a mushroom he thought was rare is actually very common, and also considered to not taste very good. So he's kind of upset. He just kind of draws a picture of the mushroom in the soil, and is clearly perturbed by the fact that nobody really seems to think highly of his rare mushrooms. So he just kind of sulks to himself for a little bit. But it then cuts to Benimaru and Benimaru actually hanging up some dried persimmons, which are apparently a type of fruit, and I didn't know they were a thing until I watched this episode, but apparently they're a real fruit. So yeah, and Shuna eventually comes along and sees what her brother's doing and kind of admires that how much work he's actually putting into it, and he merely remarks that that the villagers actually brought him along, and he decided to turn them into dried snacks that he can eat later while he's in battle, remarking that he actually got a sweet bit of a sweet tooth from his father, who apparently always carried dried persimmons into battle and always used them as a snack. And that he usually bit into them, they were always sweet, and that he kind of admires it, and then he apologizes for kind of bringing up that memory. But when he looks over at Shuna, she's making a stupid face, and it's later revealed that that the memory she had was of Benimaru biting into a sour persimmon and making that exact face. And Benimaru is kind of annoyed that she's making that face about him and bringing up that kind of memory, and remarks that she's never going to get married if she constantly does things like that. Which I mean, granted, he may or may not be wrong, because while we know that she has feelings for Rimuru, it's kind of up for a debate as to whether or not the reverse is true. So he may be right about that. Maybe. I mean, I'm not gonna deny anybody's ship, and I kind of ship them myself. But we as far as we know, we haven't really seen any sort of loving relationship out of Rimuru and Shuna. So we have no idea how that actually how a relationship like that would actually work, or even if they could produce children, because we don't know, because Rimuru doesn't seem like he has the proper equipment. But or at least that's how I'm going to put it in a YouTube safe kind of way. But in any case, after all of that, it eventually becomes time to harvest the sweet potatoes, and Training is actually collecting potatoes and kind of teaching people how to become more attuned with nature. Everybody remarks that they've now learned the value of hard work and actually harvesting their own food, and it's all thanks to Rimuru, and that if they hadn't, they wouldn't have thought it was possible. But Training remarks that they're actually becoming more attuned with nature because of that, and also proceeds to start listening to the potatoes to find out what they want to be, and starts sorting them into boxes based on what they want to be when they get made into food, basically. So she listens to the one the way she describes is that she starts listening to them, listening to their voice, and as it were, and putting them into boxes. And when Haruna again kind of shows a little bit of confusion, Training really remarks that the sweet potatoes are probably done, and then proceeds to go and to investigate that. And sure enough, she's not wrong, because it then cuts to a scene of Rimuru and his friends all kind of eating sweet potatoes, and Milim kind of falls in love with the idea of cooking sweet potatoes and eating them. So yeah, she bites into a cooked sweet potato for the first time, and is thrown for a loop about how tasty it is. And is completely happy with the fact that she now has found a new favorite snack, and then proceeds to wolf down several. And Rimuru and Shion merely have a little bit of an aside about how it seems like she never really got to experience cooked sweet potatoes, and wonders what kind of sheltered life she's been living that she has never had a cooked sweet potato before. And Shion merely adds that it's clear that she didn't really live a life of happiness before. But she then proceeds to, it also does a cutaway where Milim, upon returning to her own village, kind of throws a bit of a temper tantrum because the people who are trying to placate her and satisfy her don't know what she actually wants, and are a little bit confused that she doesn't like plain vegetables anymore. So yeah, they're completely confused. But in any case, they proceed to start giving sweet potatoes out to everybody. There's also a scene where Gapta brings a whole bag of cooked sweet potatoes to his friends. And as they're eating, Gapta notices that Hakaru is kind of just zoning out, admiring the leaves. And remarks that as the seasons have changed, he's kind of become a bit more like this, and noticed that he's gotten a lot more distant and misty-eyed for extended periods of time. But then proceeds to kind of completely derail the sentiment of that because he notices that his master's back is turned and they all proceed to try and attack, to get a sneak attack on him, which he then completely deflects and then proceeds to knock them all on their ass and then steal their sweet potatoes to because of that. And Galto merely backtracks about it from that, remarking that he was wondering if he was just kind of zoning out and going senile, but Hakurun merely assures them that he's all there and then asks them if they want to try again, which they adamantly refuse to and then run off. And then Hakurun remarks that he doesn't really have to give them a time of day. And also this is kind of off by itself, but there's a scene of Suki and Suwa and Suki kind of Sui and Soka kind of harvesting chestnuts. But they frame it as a training exercise with Sui attacking Soka with his silk strands, but as it turns out, no, he's just harvesting chestnuts, and then a chestnut lands on her head, and she's kind of a little bit annoyed, and a little bit upset that they weren't doing what she thought they were doing. So she becomes a little bit upset, and Sui merely notices that she's upset and asks if she likes chestnuts, and she responds that she is, but that's not why she's crying. But in case they continue to hand out sweet potatoes to everybody else. And Training even brings sweet potatoes to all of the orcs to make sure that they all get food for all their hard work. And they proceed to celebrate. But one of the orcs notices that Geld is just kind of staring at his and asks him what's wrong, and he merely tells them to go away and that they shouldn't mind him and that they should just continue to eat. And then it's revealed that he actually brings the sweet potato back as an offering to his father, who, as you guys may or may not remember, was one of the bigger antagonists of the first season and is now gone. So Geld decides to kind of leave a sweet potato on as an offering to his father. But then all of the orcs and the little goblin girl that he's become friends with over the course of these past several episodes, they all come along and remark that they should eat their sweet potato together, and Geld decides to join them. So, it's kind of a bit of a solemn moment of Geld just having this kind of solemn reflection of a fight by himself, but he has friends that are actually able to pull him out of his funk, so I think he'll be alright. But in case after all the harvesting has been done, Training remarks that it has been a bountiful harvest, and Rimuru agrees, pointing out that they worked hard to get all of the food that they need. At which point Training remarks that it's clear that she's no longer needed there, and that all she really wanted was for Rimuru and his friends to actually become self-sufficient, and remarks that they'll actually see each other again one day, and then leaves. And Rimuru was completely thrown for a loop by this, because it was just, not only is it just so completely sudden that for Training to just suddenly leave, but he doesn't even know how to process it. He's completely thrown for a loop that this person that he's looked up to and for guidance and has been a close friend to him for a long time just suddenly up and leaves. And obviously he tries to point, and obviously one of the hobgoblins actually notices that he's upset and asks him what's wrong, but he decides to start and tell them that Training just kind of left, but then decides against it, remarking that's not what Training would have wanted and that they need to continue to be self-sufficient, but does remark that they will eventually see each other again. And again, happens sooner than he thinks, because he goes into her bar wondering if she'll actually be there, and as it turns out, she is. So she just kind of pretends that she's going away forever, when in actuality she's just kind of leaving, saying, "Hey, I'll see you tomorrow." And Rimuru is obviously very upset by that. But in any case, there is one final scene at the end where after all the harvesting has been done and it's now the day's break, Milim, Shuna, and Shion actually go to the bathhouse, and Milim remarks about how many tasty treats they were able to create in the past day, and Shion remarks that it was because of our hard work that they were able to actually get so much tasty food. But Shuna corrects her, pointing out that it was actually the hard work of the entire village and not just Shion and Milim. So. But also remark that they should actually get out of the hot spring, or they're going to get dizzy and maybe a little bit disoriented. So they do. And when they go to the changing room to get dressed, Shuna remarks that she's actually going to be making a new dessert using some of the new treats that they've harvested, and Milim is over the moon for that because, as we've established, she's very much a little kid. Despite being 20,000 years old, she is very much a child at heart. And she only agrees, pointing out that eating desserts late at night seems a little bit risque. But then they spy something out of the corner of their eye. As it turns out, Rimuru had left them a scale to make sure that they didn't overeat and overdo it on the snacks. Needless to say, they proceed to shun him for the rest of the episode in the final scene, and they've completely broken his scale so that they can because they kind of felt insulted about Rimuru trying to help them monitor their weight. And even then, Rimuru remarks that it wasn't meant as a malicious thing or anything like that. As he explains it, he thought that girls actually do worry about their weight a little bit, and he was just trying to help. He was just trying to help them manage their weight by leaving a scale, and presumably he left one on the boys' side as well. But the three of them are actually very upset that Rimuru insinuated they were fat. Milim remarking that she doesn't actually gain any weight. Shion remarking that it all goes to her chest anyway, and Shuna merely remarking that it's clear that they should disband the entire group, secret sisterhood of Swedes. So yeah, Rimuru kind of realizes that he made them all upset, but then he proceeds to give the intro for the next episode. So yeah, it ends on kind of a bit of a comical note where all these new treats mean that they can actually harvest new resources and make new snacks, but they shouldn't overdo it, and they should always do it in moderation. But the girls kind of didn't take it that way at all. So yeah, that's how this episode ends. But in any case, that's gonna do it for my review of That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime Diaries. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. And also, be sure to check out my Patreon if you want to help support the show. It's only a couple bucks a month. It really helps me out, and you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks, and I'm always saying thanks, not least of which being that that's a support me, support you kind of thing. So go check that out. I will also list you on my website if you go help support me over there. I also post written reviews over there, so be sure to check those out. And also, if you want to see more tech content from me, then be sure to check out my Twitch. I live stream over there. I post the VODs up here, but if you guys want to see them live, they're over there. I upload them over here because Twitch doesn't constantly save them like YouTube does. It eventually gets rid of them to save for content reasons. I don't know. But yeah, we've been streaming Utopia for the past month. I'm going to be streaming it again this coming week, so be sure to go check that out if you're interested. I've been enjoying it. It's a very fun game. We're actually going to be continuing on with the World 2 because we've actually finished World 1 and can actually move on from that. But yeah, it's gonna be a very interesting idea. It's got very interesting, and I do hope you guys will go check those streams out. And also, if you want to see more content from me, again, be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent video. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is the video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try more of what you like, or see something completely different, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But regardless of whether or not you do any or all of those things, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!